Peace, party people. Ahaha, see you later. Yo, this is DJ Elbow Greasy coming to you live, and this is part deux, the second edition of Tuesdays with Trump. I'm so excited to be here. Going through the first iteration was a challenge, making sure I had all of the equipment and uh, the content, and to just bring my most authentic self. Um, so a couple of things. I apologize about the sound quality. I know I think at times I moved away from the microphone, so it just didn't sound as good as it could have. Sometimes I was mumbling. Um, so I'm going to work on those things, and if you would bear with me, I'd really appreciate it. Um, to be clear, what is Tuesdays with Trump, right? So this is a weekly podcast series. It is not an extended podcast series. I don't anticipate doing this any further past the 14th edition or 14th episode, which will fall on the line of Election Day. So if you could possibly check me on that day, I hope to go live. Um, but I really am much appreciative for the number of people that reached out or responded or gave me critical feedback on what to focus on, what to change. Not in terms of the content, but just in terms of the delivery, the technical aspect of it. And again, this is my first time doing this on my own. And so I hope you'll continue to support the podcast, continue to support my efforts. I'm doing this exclusively on my own. It's completely independent, and feel free to uh, like my YouTube page. Feel free to, if you want to support what I do, feel free to do so in whichever way you see fit. And I appreciate it. And hope you are doing well. This has been an interesting week. As you know, the summer is trying to leave us, which is not cool. And I'm looking forward to starting a new year as an educator and building with my students. And hopefully they'll, open and receptive to building with me. And, let's just move forward, right? Okay. So we talked about what Tuesdays with Trump is, what it is not. Um, Again, also, I hope to have guests on the show. I know a number of folks who are Trump supporters, particularly men, particularly black men, that want to give their thoughts and ideas on why they are choosing to support Donald Trump. I know some Latino brothers that feel the same way. I'd love to have them on the show and give us a little brief explanation about, why you're choosing to support Donald Trump. Um, this is not an opportunity for people to endorse Donald Trump on this show. I would hate for people to feel like that's the opportunity, but it's more just to have dialogue, right? So I welcome that from folks who aren't just in America. There's some folks who are in other countries that I've had some interesting dialogue regarding Donald Trump. Um, but yes, that nationalistic pride, which unfortunately is exuberant. I'm sorry, is exhibited in a lot of different negative ways. You can see what's happening in England. You see what's happening in Argentina, um, Brazil. I think they actually just elected someone different this time around in Brazil. Thank goodness. But you know, it's a scary world that we're entering in when someone can project strength in their mind and not be rationally sound, right? So that's a major concern. So anyway, let's get into it. It's been a really eventful week up until, my God, like right the bookends of times when Trump has spoken to the media um, has been quite concerning, and we want to break that down for us, or for you. Um, so on Tuesday, August 6th, a photo was released by the Washington Post showing Trump on an airplane with an author, one of the co-authors from the Heritage Foundation, who wrote a forward to Project 2025. His name is Kevin Roberts. He and Trump were on a plane to a Heritage Foundation conference where Trump was going to give the keynote. Um, this was taken, I believe, in 2022. This photo. Uh, he has a book coming out called Dawn's Early Light, Taking Back Washington to Save America, and it includes a forward by J.D. Vance. Um, but, but ironically, they claim they have nothing to do with Project 2025, right? So the deception to me is quite revealing. Like why not double down on your intentions, right? Like why not embrace the idea that you're accepting Project 2025? Um, but Trump was getting a lot of pressure regarding Project 2025. And shout outs to MSNBC's Joyanne Reed. She's been addressing it every evening for this past week. When Kamala was not a presidential candidate, but rather a vice presidential candidate, she created an ad with Taraji P. Henson, then hosted the BET Awards to remind people to Google Project 2025. And on the show, the BET Awards, Taraji did her part to remind people to do their research and look up Project 2025. Um, but like they would always say, if you're trying to hide something, put it in a book, right? Most people don't read. A lot of my students don't read. Folks scroll, they click, and reading requires thought and reflection, and it requires responsibility. So there's that old adage: the more you know, the more you owe. And responsibility on educating and informing the masses or yourself is a heavy weight, knowing the contents of Project 2025. So we're going to actually approach this again later in the show because even though Donald Trump claims he is not, he didn't write Project 2025, he has something to do with Project 2025. Some of the sentiment from Project 2025 leaks out in a conversation that he had later this past week. So um, that was Tuesday. So Wednesday, I just want to get to the facts. On August 7th, um, J.D. Vance and his team of Secret Service agents approached the Secret Service agents of Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Walz's on a tarmac in Wisconsin. He wasn't able to advance any farther than a practical stare down between the Secret Service agents, and then he began pontificating to the press. Hey, I came to check out my plane. It's a shame you all are here to see, and she won't talk to you, right? He says this to the press as he casually, walks away. Um, and since JD Vance isn't taking his future job seriously, right? Since they want to waste the resources provided by the Secret Service team, I propose the federal government contract the Nation of Islam to employ the Fruit of Islam to accompany JD Vance any and everywhere, right? Like, can you imagine JD Vance walking through Harlem, Detroit, Oakland, or even any of the hillbilly communities he's from, right? Since Trump didn't want Byron Donalds or Tim Scott, having the Fruit of Islam will give Trump an authentic look of diversity. These evangelicals would love it because since Trump loves the Bible, J.D. Vance, as a Yale attorney, could show his connection to having a multi pronged approach to religion beyond Christianity. Vance is showing that he is irrelevant and simply a hillbilly at heart. He succumbs to the provincial stereotypes of these folks. He can brag about having a mama, I think he calls her mama, his grandmother, who own guns, etc. But this is not diversity. This is an extension of Trump without a silver spoon. You know, in all, I know all jokes aside, we have to be honest about what's happening, right? We actually had a stalker for Kamala Harris, and he actually tried to get on stage and approach her. And if it wasn't for Karine Jean Pierre, who is currently the White House spokesperson, she was a moderator of this conversation, and it wasn't for her husband, who also interceded. Who knows how close that person might have gotten to Kamala and what he would have done. And so for JD Vance to somehow stalk Kamala, thank goodness we have Secret Service to stop him and whatever antics he has. But that's not how we should be using our resources. JD, you're starting to seem like a clown, straight up. And I'm really concerned about my brothers and sisters who are thinking that this is someone who would be the next person in line to be president. And of all the criticisms I've heard about Kamala that are being repeated by these brothers and sisters, it's primarily contrived. They're interpreting the idea of a black woman exhibiting joy. They're interpreting the idea of a black woman identifying being biracial, as if she's not intelligent, she's not serious. It's absolutely ridiculous. Um, so before we get to Thursday, I believe it was on Wednesday or it could have been Tuesday. Um, but Trump had a conversation with he telephoned into Fox and Friends in the morning, and the conversation was about Governor Walz. And Trump said specifically during the protest of George Floyd, there were a number of people outside of his home, out of Tim Walz's home, and that Tim Walz called Trump. And Trump responded by saying, or he described allegedly there was, he claims that there were protesters outside of his home with, with American flags. And the idea is that, Tim Walz was supposed to feel threatened and that he calls Trump. And then Trump then makes a phone call or does something and they decide to go away. So, like, wait, are you telling me you diverted a lynch mob? I mean, is that what you're saying happened? Because that's ultimately a lynch mob, right? And I'm getting the scene from To Kill a Mockingbird in my head, right? I'm thinking of the Scottsboro Boys, right? I'm just thinking this idea that Trump has no connection to history and he can make it appear as though he can end a riot and he could start a riot, which we've already seen with the coup on January 6th. But I digress. Let's head on to Thursday, August 8th. So this was the press conference of all press conferences. It was at Mar-a-Lago, and there were two particular issues that Trump brought up that just that were just ridiculous. Let's start first and foremost with this idea that he was on a helicopter. Or Trump alleges he was on a helicopter with former mayor of San Francisco, and he was also a former speaker of California. Apologize. His name is Willie Brown. So Willie Brown is a crucial fixture um, in San Francisco Bay Area politics. He's an African American man. Um, he is separated from his wife, but there was a period of time where he had a relationship with Kamala Harris. And when he had that relationship with Kamala Harris, he and his wife were separated. Um, so in the press conference at Mar-a-Lago, Trump alleged that well, a couple of things. First, he says he knows Willie Brown very well. Uncertain if that's true. He alleges that um, Trump alleges that Willie Brown told him some terrible things about Kamala Harris. Not true. um, and alleges that Willie Brown is not a fan of Kamala Harris. Now, these are things that are not hard to ascertain, right? So, of course, reporters found Willie Brown in San Francisco. He eats at the same place every day for lunch. And Willie Brown said, one, I stand by Kamala, I support Kamala. Two, I've never been in a helicopter with Donald Trump, and if the helicopter was going to go down or not, you don't think I would have told people about this, right? So I mean, it just never happened, right? And I think he's just trying to create some type of issue with particularly black men or men in general to somehow look at Kamala Harris as if she's worthy of gossip, right? She's not about serious business. Like, men can sit around and just gossip about her, especially men that have had past relationships with her, right? And then you think about how he's trying to project Kamala to women to get women to feel as though this is not a serious person, that is in politics, and that it's okay to not support her because she's not the type of woman that represents women. This is the type of woman that men will kiki and gossip about, right? Um, let alone the fact that he lied. So let's get to the reality of what actually happened, right? What really happened is at some point in the 90s, Donald Trump wanted a hotel in a district of Los Angeles, and he wanted a casino in the hotel. And so he flew out a representative, a city council person from that district whose name was Nate Holden, right? And the idea was that he and Nate flew from New York City to New Jersey to go see his casinos in New Jersey, Atlantic City. Unfortunately, the helicopter had to do an emergency landing. And, you know, Nate Holden's from New Jersey, so he wasn't really impressed with Donald Trump trying to show off. But essentially, this actually happened. That's the person that he was in the helicopter with, not not Willie Brown. Two different black people, right? Um, and yeah, I mean, I just, you know, I mean, this is fodder for the press, but I just feel like the press is not doing as good a job to bring out this fact, right? Um, you know, after that, we have something that just like broke my heart, right? And Donald Trump, he compared the his speech that he gave on January 6th to the March on Washington. Um, and he compared himself as an orator in terms of the crowd that he drew, and that no one has spoken in front of more people. And then he brought in MLK, and then said that he had more people. Oh my God. So, one, Trump said it's hard to find a picture of the crowd from January 6th. Oh, no, it's not. So that's a lie. And number two, he says no one has spoken to crowds bigger than him. Oh my God. And then the third thing, as I said, he says if you look at Martin Luther King and you look at ours, same real estate, same number of people. If not, we had more. We actually had more people. They say I had 25,000. He had 1 million people. And I'm okay with it because I like Dr. Martin Luther King. Like, you just sound like a crazy person. My God. And you call Kamala loony? So on January 6th, Trump led 50,000 people to the Capitol to revolt against the federal government to stop the vote from being certified. And he's comparing the speech he gave, a pre coup speech, to a speech given to save America from racist people and policies. I mean, that's just like apples and oranges, right? At the March on Washington, former Congressman John Lewis, the chairman of SNCC, had to tone down his speech. And you know why he had to tone down his speech? It's because the organizers were thinking that, oh my gosh, bro, like if you say what you're saying, it's going to cause, it could cause a riot. So I need you to alter that speech. Meanwhile, Trump and his cronies just turned it up, right? Um, and so since we're going to talk about Dr. King, I think it's very easy to just say, I have a dream, or call it the March on Washington. Why don't we actually acknowledge what King said and how King's words resonate with what we're experiencing today? So, this is the part of the speech that is often omitted. And his speech did not start with, I have a dream today. His speech actually started with this. And bear with me, I'm going to read through this for you. I'm happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration of for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon of hope to millions of slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the colored America is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the colored American is still sadly crippled by the manacle of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the colored American lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the colored American is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our great republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed to the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given its colored people a bad check, a check that has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we have come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is not time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality to all God's children. I would be I would be fatal for the nation. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment and to underestimate the determination of its colored citizens. This sweltering summer of the colored people's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hoped that the colored Americans needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the colored citizen is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the colored person's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a colored person in Mississippi cannot vote and a colored person in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, no, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of your trials and tribulations. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by storms of persecutions and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our modern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you, my friends, we have the difficulties of today and tomorrow. I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream. Listen, so you can talk crowds. However, one person's speech is clear, clear as day. One person's speech, who at the time was the President of the United States of America, his speech incited a riot, which led to the loss of lives. And his second impeachment. Let it be known he was impeached twice in the House. And that speech and the actions that led to afterwards led to his second impeachment. Sadly, Dr. King's words, those beautiful, transformative words, led to the alteration of our country and to his untimely demise. And this is what gets me about Donald Trump. And I'm going to speak about Monday. But when you purse your lips to speak of assassination, you had best acknowledge the pain black folks have gone through and how many of our folks, how many American heroes who fought for civil rights were murdered. It doesn't seem to cross his mind, let alone former presidents, but it doesn't seem to cross his mind. I mean, God forbid this man is not woke. Okay, so Friday, August 9th, I would have assumed Trump would have crawled under a hole, right? Or crawled in a hole, because I'm not going to give a press conference like that on, I believe that was Thursday. Yeah, Thursday, and then just show up and give a rally the next day. But he did, and he showed up in the state of Montana, where a couple of things that he said, and these are things that you're going to hear in every single speech leading up to the election, and it's unfounded, it's borderline crazy. But let's just go through the thread of things that we know he's going to say. This is after it's been clear that even members of his party are trying to bring him to be a bit more, to show some class. So, one, he said Kamala is heavy into the trans world and many other worlds. What does it mean to be heavy into the trans world? What is that supposed to mean? Let alone many other worlds, but heavy into the trans world. I don't get that. And he's probably talking about Walsh too, because Walsh was a member of the GSA, the Students Gay Student Association, as a football coach at his school, and I believe he advocated like tampons in boys and girls bathrooms. Like, okay, so what? Like, it's not a big issue. But this whole idea of being heavy into the trans world, I guess that's what that means. And many other worlds. What is many other worlds? I don't know. I gotta ask my fellow Trump supporters who'll let me know. Number two, Kamala was nasty to Biden about the school bus. Okay, so I'm going to read something to you from the Washington Post about Joe Biden and this school bus issue, right? So, when Joe Biden was a freshman senator in the mid 1970s, his home state of Delaware, like other hot spots across the country, was engulfed in a bitter battle over school busing, debating whether children should be sent to schools in different neighborhoods to promote racial diversity. Biden took a lead role in the fight, speaking out repeatedly and forcefully against sending white children to majority black schools and black children to majority white schools. He played down the persistence of overt racism and suggested that the government should have a limited role in integration. I do not buy the concept popular in the 60s, which said we have suppressed the black man for 300 years and the white man is now far ahead in the race for everything our society offers. In order to even the score, we must now give the black man a head start or even hold the white man back to even the race, Biden told a newspaper, a Delaware based weekly newspaper in 1975. I don't buy that. Yes, so for my fellow brothers and sisters who were like, I'm not going to vote for Biden because he's a racist. Yes, he said those words and he has since apologized for it. But Kamala held him those words held Biden's feet to the flames for having said those words. And so I think that's what Trump was getting at by talking about Kamala and what she said about the school bus. Oh my god. Also, I don't know what Trump thought, how Trump thought Kamala should have treated Biden. She was right to stand up against them. And, historically, Biden was wrong not just about that, he was wrong about Clarence Thomas, the way Anita Hill was treated publicly, uh, and the 94 crime bill. I had to write about that following Clinton's election in 92. They spent more money on prisons and started this whole idea of investing in prisons, right? And not investing in education. And now look at our country. We have all of these prisons and people getting locked up for frivolous, you know, frivolous reasons, but for whatever reason, we're not supposed to acknowledge or speak to that. That's ridiculous, right? Um, the third thing you'll hear is it's he actually said this. It's constitutional illegal to take the presidency from Joe Biden. Joe Biden stepped down. He didn't step down as a president. He stepped down as a candidate running for president. So you can still be president and you can choose not to run for the upcoming election, but you do have someone who you ran on the ticket with, and that happens to be Kamala Harris, which is why Kamala Harris assumes the position of presidential candidate, and then she's going to pick and choose who she wants as vice president. But Trump doesn't want that, right? Trump says he's doing well with black men. And that's my issue. And I'm a black man. And another reason I'm doing Tuesdays with Trump, I'm talking from the lens of a black man. I do not support Trump. Let it be abundantly clear. I do not support Trump. And I want to bring out my brothers who do. So this is an open forum, open call. If you know some brothers that are down for Trump, reach out to me. I would love to have them on. I'm not sitting here promoting these ideas, and I'm going to challenge them if I think they're not sound, and if they're misogynistic, if they are racist, and if they're ignorant. But I do want to have open dialogue with my brothers because I don't like our culture being put out there like this. And the idea of black men not supporting a black woman for these frivolous reasons. Anyway, he says he's doing well with black men and not with black women. Wonder why. But he's doing well with white males and the Jewish vote. Like, what is that supposed to mean? I don't get that, right? Um, so Josh Shapiro, he says that Josh Shapiro is a terrible guy. That's going to change because the narrative has been he was a great guy, and Kamala didn't choose Josh Shapiro because Josh Shapiro is Jewish. So Kamala is somehow anti Semitic. The Democratic Party as a whole is anti Semitic, and Josh Shapiro was the candidate that was supposed to have been chosen. This is going to be an ongoing narrative that we're going to have to deal with. Six, JD Vance is doing a great job. No, he is not. Are you kidding me? He just stalked Kamala Harris on the tarmac. That should be a clear indication he's not doing a good job, but I digress. Oh, this one was funny. Oh, we have the enthusiasm. Come on now. You and I both know that's what everyone's talking about. They have the enthusiasm, they have the joy, and Trump and them are just talking about doom and gloom, right? We won't have a country if we elect Kamala, right? But can we remind him we had COVID? Like we, like you got elected and we got COVID. So are we going to talk about that? Um, this one's funny. Everyone's going to have an electric car. Everyone's going to have an electric car if Kamala Harris gets elected. So here's the thing. I actually have an electric car, right? And the idea, or we have an electric car. The idea is that there are certain incentives provided to you by our federal government if you choose to get an electric car. If you choose not to, you just don't get those incentives, and that's just it. Excuse me. We have the largest crowd sizes in history, and in any country, South Carolina, Alabama. First of all, South Carolina and Alabama aren't countries. I don't know why like he said it like that, but it is telling that you're only referring to the deep south, right? You're not talking California, you're not talking in Washington, you're not talking in I don't know, Wisconsin. You're only referring to the deep south, right? They're immigrants coming from countries no one's ever heard of. Isn't that like you telling us you don't know these countries? Mind you, you were once the president and are campaigning to be president again, but you're letting us know that you are very like not good with geography. That's not. You shouldn't say that out loud, my brother. Here's another one. Of course, there's gonna be a peaceful transfer of power, and there was last time. I just hope we have honest elections. Number one, what is an honest election? I don't know what that is. Am I supposed to assume that you mean I just want to make sure that people don't cheat and it's very clear who won and we don't have to carry on to the next day? Okay, so fine. Support legislation that you can start counting votes as soon as they are being submitted. Support legislation that extends that will create a federal holiday, so we don't have to actually go to work that day to make it more difficult to vote. right? These are things that we can do as a nation if he cares about honest elections, right? And no, there was not a peaceful transfer of power. For you to say that out loud is showing me that you don't really care about the words that are coming out of your mouth. Uh, Number 13, she's not smart enough to do a press conference. Okay. Number 14, we're close to World War III. You are trying to get us close to World War III. We're not going to be close to World War III under the Harris Waltz regime, but under you, we would, right? Um, it takes courage to endorse people. So what's funny is that he said it takes courage to endorse, and then he like there's like a little pause, and for me, I interpret it as saying it takes courage to endorse like crazy people, unfit people, misogynistic people, racist people, ignorant people. So you fill in the blank. What makes sense to you, right? Ooh, this was crazy. No one was killed on January 6th. So here we are, supposed to acknowledge the fact that he got there was an assassination attempt against him, but yet like when people have actually been killed, he just pretends that that didn't even happen. It's just sick. Um, they were there to complain, not through me. What? You know, the number of Trump flags. I'm not even going to get into that. I'm just going to keep going. Number 18. It's it's unconstitutional to lose the primary and then run for president. So, okay, let me remind you. I can't believe I'm actually saying this. Kamala Harris is the current vice president. She ran in the last election in the primary and then dropped out. And Biden selected her as his running mate. So she's currently in office as the vice president right now. So, yes, she can run for the presidential election. All right, this one was a little scary, but it's on brand with his language and particularly the use of the word superior. Hillary is far superior to Kamala. Like, I've never said one individual is superior to another because that just sounds racist as hell. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't say that at all. To me it's an idea of you have this superiority complex or you have a white superiority complex. I don't know, and I don't care to know, but you need to keep your superiority complex to yourself, period. um Everybody wanted to get rid of Roe v. Wade, the abortion issue tampered down. What the heck are you talking? Like, you don't decide that the abortion issue is not an issue anymore. As a candidate, you can't decide, well, these issues aren't important anymore simply because you don't know what to say about the issue, or what you have said has caused divisions and a loss of support. So I suggest you check yourself, buddy. Dems are bad to Israel and Jewish people. You need to get your head examined if you vote for her. So, can we just acknowledge that there are Jewish people who were students who were actually supportive of the protests against what the Jewish government is doing? Can we also acknowledge that you can be Jewish and not be supportive of Israel? You're not like tied to the country of Israel. You can be Jewish and you can be supportive of the Palestinian cause for freedom in Israel. You can be Jewish and supportive of Palestinians or supportive of people who are protesting the state of Israel in America. Like, you can do both. But what Trump is trying to do is trying to get Jews to think that you're supposed to support him, who was supportive of the folks in Virginia carrying these tiki torches saying Jews will not replace us. And he said there were good people on both sides. That's the person that Trump is hoping Jewish people support. And so you can be anti Semitic publicly one day, then the next day, all of a sudden, you're not anti Semitic. I'm just really confused. And I'm just hoping my Jewish brothers and sisters can see through this crazy shit, man. Um, Listen, people are voting with their stomachs. What that means, I don't know. I don't think I want to know. I'm going to move on. Um, he attributes the rise in polls to she's a woman and she represents certain groups. When people find out about her, she'll be much less. She'll be much less of what? A person? And what groups does she represent? Because she has connections to a multitude of people across like cultural connection because she's a woman? Ugh. All right, this one was insane. This house has guns. This idea that he wanted signs to be able to be put in front of homes where people wouldn't break into those homes because the sign will say this house has guns. I don't. Mm-mm. Oh my God. And this one, I put something in when I was president. There will be no low income housing developments built in areas. So he said something like that. And I actually found the actual transcript of what he said. So I'm going to read it to you and bear with me. It's going to sound crazy. Um, Blah, 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 are right next to your house. You have a house in the suburbs. You're so proud. And then they want to build a low income job with a 30-story building next to your house. And your house is worthless. And I stopped it. And then they say, well, I don't think suburban women like them. I think they like me. And I'm going to keep criminals out of your neighborhood. That's really all that matters. I think they like me anyway. You're not going to have migrant criminals preying on our women and our girls while guns are confiscated from the law abiding citizens. They want to take away your guns and they want to have our country overrun with some of the worst criminals there are anywhere in the world. And they come from all over the world. They come from Africa, they come from Asia. They come from the Middle East. They come from all over. They come in large. They come in a large boatload. They came recently from the Congo. Where do you come from? Where in the Congo? Prison. What did you do wrong? We don't. We do not want to say. Murder it was. Murder. And they're dumping them into our country. The money they're saving, these other countries, they don't, their prison population is way down. The money they're saving is they've never had it so good. And if I were running any of those countries, if I were running Colombia, if I were running Brazil, if I were, I'd be doing the same thing, but I'd be doing it faster than they're doing it. Why wouldn't you do it? It's common sense. Dump all your criminals, in Venezuela. Crime is down 72%. You know why? Because he took all the criminals out of Caracas and out of all the cities. He took all of them out and dumped them into the United States. He emptied his prisons into the United States of America. Why are we taking this? Why do we take this? Why? So don't take my word for it. Listen, Kamala Harris's agenda straight from her own mouth. Would anybody like to see her? Let's do it for a couple of seconds. Go ahead. Yeah, I am radical. You need to get radical about what we are doing and take it seriously. As President of the United States, I'm prepared to get rid of the filibuster, pass a Green New Deal. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's who you support. I mean, you literally just made it clear that if they're building low income housing or they're building if there's a job site that is attracting people from low income housing or people who are poor or people who are migrants from other countries, then that means they're criminals, right? And just make sure we're clear on what makes you a criminal who happens to be a migrant. You're from countries we've never heard of, right? You heard that, right? And so I believe he said the Middle East. He made abundantly clear Africa, right? What is he trying to say? He's not trying to say anything. He's saying directly what he's saying, right? Like these are, as they say, as he said, shithole countries, right? And they are increasing the amount of crime in our country as if American citizens don't commit crime in our country. So we're just going to ignore that fact, right? Okay. All right. So Saturday, I listen. I needed a break, and when I've talked to people about like what I have to listen to, I don't think you all understand. I'm listening to Trump speeches practically every day, and after a while, it actually has an impact on your emotional stance, your mood, right? But on August 11th, on Sunday, JD Vance decided to appear on a series of Sunday morning shows. And so I'm going to share with you what he said on Face the Nation. He says that they started talking about abortion. And he said that Democrats support abortion up to the moment of birth, which is not true. He claims that Kamala Harris supported the Born Alive Act. And thank God Face the Nation decided to project on their screen, if you watch it online, that Kamala Harris did not support the Born Alive Act. I'm not even sure what the Born Alive Act is, but abundantly clear shout out the Face the Nation for saying, nope, that's not what he supported, right? Um, but then they did ask about Nick Fuentes, right? So Nick Fuentes is someone who has had dinner with Donald Trump and with he brought Kanye West as a guest, right? And he's made racist statements about JD Vance's wife and children. I think he said, "Who marries someone? Our first lady is going to be someone. Our first lady, if he becomes president, but uh, you know, as the wife of the vice president. I don't know what they call that. The first madam. I'm not sure. Uh, but saying like we're gonna. I think one of his kids, JD Vance's kids, his name is Vivek, right? And so he's like, oh, we're gonna have a kid named Vivek in the Oval Office, right? Um, and JD Van, and so the question is like, why would you support run on a ticket with somebody who has these kinds of people over for dinner? And he that this is what he says. What I care more about a person that attacks me personally or bad government policies that discriminates based on race. That's what I worry about. I'm so confused. What are you worried about? Like, so we're gonna ignore the fact that this man is speaking negatively about your children, speaking negatively about your own wife, and you care about policy that just allegedly discriminates against white people? Are you serious? And so then he appeared on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And George wasn't there, but Jonathan Karl was there. So Jonathan Karl was interviewing him. And Jonathan Karl, I'm going to read to you literally from the transcript Jonathan Karl and JD Vance. Okay. So this is very hard stuff. There's been a lot of talk about racism and whatnot you face. Some really nasty stuff. Um, I saw this thing that Nick Fuentes, of course, he's an avowed white supremacist. He said, "What kind of man married somebody named Usha? Clearly doesn't value his racial heritage." I mean, this is racist garbage. And here he goes. Yes, it is. But this is also a guy that dined with Donald Trump at Mar a Lago during his campaign. Well, this is JD Vance. Well, Donald Trump doesn't know anything about and frankly doesn't care for but yeah, look, my attitude to these people attacking my wife is she's beautiful, she's smart. What kind of man marries Usha? A very smart man and a very lucky man. Importantly, and my view is look, if these guys want to attack me or attack my policy views, my personality, come after me. But don't attack my wife. She's out of your league. What? So Jonathan Carl continues. But I mean, that dinner that Trump had, and of course, it was Kanye West, the guy that's praised Hitler or arranged it all. That was back a year and a half ago, and Trump still hasn't given a full throated denouncement of this guy who has said that terrible stuff. But he said, I mean, he's a white supremacist, JD Vance. Look, I think President Trump has issued plenty of condemnations on this. The one thing that I like, point, the one thing that I like about Donald Trump, John, is that he actually will talk to anybody. But just because you talk to someone doesn't mean you endorse their views. And look, I mean, Donald Trump spent a lot of quality time with my wife, and every time he sees her, he gives her a hug, tells her she's beautiful, and jokes around with her a little bit. But I'm not all worried about Donald Trump. I'm worried sometimes about these ridiculous attacks. But again, this is what you sign up for when you come into politics. I wish people would keep it focused on me, but whatever they're going to say, they're going to say. My wife's tough enough to handle it, and that's a good thing, all right? Jonathan Carl goes, all right, uh, let's focus on something that's gotten a lot of attention. I mean, this cat ladies comment. You talked about Democratic Party dominated by childless cat ladies. Put that aside. You also made a policy proposal. Yes, which was why Tucker Carlson had you on for that interview. And you said you advanced giving extra votes to people with children, which seems a little, oh my God. And this is his response. Well, John, it is not a policy proposal, it's a thought experiment, right? Democrats said we should give children the right to vote. Some Democrats had said we're going to give children the right to vote. And I said, well, if we're going to give the rights to the children, then we should actually just allow the parents to cast those votes, right? I trust a parent more with a decision like that than I do, say, a 14-year old. So it's a thought experiment. There are there are thought policy positions behind my view that the country should become more pro family. I mean, Jesus. I mean, he just makes up this shit and then he just, the excuses is what I can't stand. So then he goes, so Jonathan Carl continues. Donald Trump gave the speech in Montana. He just gave, and he said that Tim Walz has signed a letter letting the state kidnap children to change their gender, that allowing pedophiles to claim, to be exempt from crimes. I mean, this is not true. It's not remotely true. And here's what JD Vance says. Well, what President Trump said, I haven't watched the whole rally, and he said he was not. He said, um, John, is that Tim Walz has supported taking children from their parents if their parents don't consent to gender reassignment. And by the way, Tim Walz gets on his high horse about mind your own damn business. One way of Minding your own damn business, John, is to not try to take my children away from me if I'm allowing the state to kidnap children to change their sexual identity. What I just explained to you, I would describe as kidnapping, John. He has absolutely done this stuff. Crazy, John. Come on, it's not. You should not be able to take people's children away from them. If you disagree with decisions about gender reassignment, yes, he has proposed that, John. He absolutely now, he absolutely has. Now, here's the more important thing, John. Why we're talking about inflation. We're talking about the fact that groceries are unaffordable. Wait, no, no. Stick to this idea that you just said that Tim Walz is going to have your children kidnapped and taken away from you if you don't allow children to decide to have gender reassignment surgery of some sort. Like, that is bizarre craziness, right? That's just JD Vance. And JD Vance is supporting what Donald Trump is saying. But I thought it couldn't get any better or it couldn't get any worse. He actually had a one on one conversation with Elon Musk. And it was 200 minutes of Trump and Elon having a conversation. And I honestly cringed throughout because I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. But I actually thought it wasn't going to happen because he got a threat from the EU. And the threat from the EU is from, actually, I'll read it to you. It's from the European Commission, uh, Thierry Breton. He says, Dear Mr. Musk, I am writing to you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom. This is August 12th, 2024. So this would have been on Monday, right? Um, Let me get to this. I'm sorry. Where did I go? All right. Dear Mr. Musk, I'm writing to you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform X of a live conversation between a U.S. presidential candidate and yourself, which will be which will also be accessible to users in the EU. I understand that you are currently doing a stress test of the platform. In this context, I am compelled to remind you of the due diligence obligations set out in the Digital Service Act, DSA, as outlined in my previous letter. As an individual entity, ultimately controlling a platform with over 300 million users worldwide, of which one third in the EU, that has been designated as a very large online platform, you have the legal obligation to ensure X's compliance with EU law, and in particular the DSA in the EU. This notably means ensuring, on one hand, that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected, and on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content in connection with relevant events, including live streaming, which, if unaddressed, might increase the risk profile of X and generate detrimental effects on civic discourse and public security. This is important against the background of recent examples of public unrest brought about by the amplification of content that promotes hatred, disorder, incitement to violence, or certain instances of disinformation. It also implies one, informing EU judicial and administrative authorities without undue delay on the measures taken to address their orders against content considered illegal according to national and or EU law. Two, taking timely, diligent, non-arbitrary, and objective action upon receipt of notices by users considering certain content illegal. Three, informing users concerning the measures taken upon receipt of the relevant notice. 4. Publicly reporting about content moderation measures. In this respect, I note that the DSA obligations apply without exceptions or discrimination to the moderation of the whole user community and content of X, including yourself as a user with over 190 million followers, which is accessible to EU users and should be fulfilled in line with the risk based approach of the DSA, which requires greater due diligence in case of a foreseeable increase of the risk profile. As you know, formal proceedings are already ongoing against X and the DSA, notably in areas linked to the dissemination of illegal content and the effectiveness of the measures taken to combat disinformation. As the relevant content is accessible to EU users and being amplified also in our jurisdiction, we cannot exclude potential spillovers in the EU. Therefore, we are monitoring the potential risks in the EU associated with the dissemination of content that may incite violence, hate, and racism in conjunction with major political or societal events around the world, including debates and interviews in the context of elections. Let me clarify that any negative effect of illegal content on X in the EU, which could be attributed to the ineffectiveness of the way in which X applies the relevant provisions of the DSA, may be relevant in the context of the ongoing proceedings of the overall assessment of X's compliance with EU law. This is in line with what has already been done in the recent past. For example, in relation to the repercussions and amplification of terrorist content or content that incites violence, hate, and racism in the EU, such as in the context of the recent riots in the United Kingdom. I therefore urge you to promptly ensure the effectiveness of your systems and to report measures taken to my team. My services and I will be extremely vigilant to any evidence that points to breaches of the DSA and will not hesitate to make full use of our toolbox, including by adopting interim measures should it be warranted to protect EU citizens from serious harm. Yours sincerely, Thierry Breton. Listen, I listen. I don't know about you. I only wish we lived in a country that did that. But we let this dude just run crazy, saying everything, anything he wants. This reminds me of the letter the FBI sent to NWA, being concerned of their content. But now someone is actually sending a letter to someone who has, repeated racist things and comments and like, yo, we're checking you and you have access to our, people in Europe and we're not gonna stand for that, right? And so, be on the lookout. Let's see what happens with Elon and X in the next couple of years in the EU. That being said, um, so he went on with it anyway. And for 20 minutes, he pontificated about, you know, um, his assassination or the assassination of Trump. And made, like, for me, if you're going to talk about having been shot as a politician, acknowledge leaders in the past have also been shot, right? I mentioned this before. But he never mentioned anything about gun control. Uh, and he didn't, like I said, mention any past folks who've been shot. Um, I'm gonna, man, it's tough to, it just takes a toll on you mentally. Um, because sometimes you just feel like no one's listening. I mean, that's another reason why I'm doing this, because like I can't sleep, and I can't think. I majored in African American studies, and to see racism get the platform that it's to see racism get the platform that it's receiving today, it really puts teeth in what Barack Obama was saying. Like, democracy is a verb, and I'm not here trying to rescue democracy. I'm trying to do something. I'm trying to bring attention to something. Like, this is serious. This is not a joke. Um, all right, so this is essentially a conversation between him and Elon, but mostly Trump talking. Um, Rough people. These are really rough people coming across, and I know rough people, and these are rough people that we don't want in our country. And the caravans are coming in, and they're putting, and who's doing this are the heads of the countries, and you would be doing it, and so would I. And everyone say, oh, what a terrible thing to say. The fact is, it's brilliant for them because they're taking all of their bad people, really bad people. And I hate to say this, the reason numbers are much bigger than you would think is they're also taking the non-productive people. Taking the non-productive people. Now, these aren't people that will kill you. We have enough of them, but these are people that are non-productive. They they are just not productive. I mean, for whatever reason, they're not workers or they don't want to work or whatever. And these countries are getting rid of non-productive people in the caravans. In many cases, they're also getting rid of their murderers and their drug dealers and the people that are really brutal people, and they're coming into our country at levels that have never been seen before. And I saw just before I got on the ad, I'm walking over in here and I saw an ad by Kamala saying how she's going to provide border security where has she been for 3.5 years? For 3.5 years, yeah, have 20 million people. It's terrible. I think this is a fundamental existential issue for the United States. And if we have another 4 more years of open borders, it's going to be even worse. With another 4 more years, can be worse than it's been for the past 3.5 years. And I'm not sure we've got a country. You don't have a country, Elon. They will get in, and you will have 50 to 60 million people from all over the world, not South America only. We think of South America, we think of Honduras and El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico. The four. But it's not that it's everywhere. They're coming in from everywhere. And I had to stay in Mexico. And this is a super important point. I'm not sure if this is Elon talking right now. A super important point, like, because, like, people, when it's like, basically, when I went down there, I was like, where are people from? It's like, it's almost no one was from Mexico. No Mexico. It's just the border. It's just the border with Mexico and the people coming in. It's Earth, the rest of Earth, and in America is only you. Know about 4 or 5% of the population of Earth. It would only take a few percent of the rest of Earth to overwhelm everything. We're already overwhelmed, Elon. We're overwhelmed. You had to see the news tonight about New York, and I love that place and how and what they're doing to it. It is horrible. What they're doing to it, and all the courts do is they try and focus on Trump. Okay, let's focus on Trump, who did nothing wrong. I complain about a rigged election, Elon. What's happened is unbelievable. You have from Africa, from the Congo. They're coming from the Congo. And 22 people came in from the Congo recently, and they're murderers. And they dropped them out of jails, which is very expensive, to maintain the jails. Although they don't do too much maintaining, I can tell you, but they take them out of jails, prisons. They take them out and they bring them to the United States. They deposit them in the United States, and say don't ever come back or you're going to be executed. And they don't want to come back, but they won't come back, sure, but they're coming from Africa, they're coming from Asia, they're coming from the Middle East, they're coming from South America, they're coming from where and there, and a lot of really, it just, a lot of, it's just a everywhere on earth thing. And it's just not possible for the United States to absorb, everyone from Earth, or, even a few percent of the rest of Earth. It's just not possible. So we're going to have, just to finish this up, we're going to have the largest deportation in history of this country. And we have no choice. Otherwise, we're going to have a country. We're not going to have a country that they want. They've done to our country. Think of it. And with, in Venezuela and in some of these other countries, crime's down 50, 60, 70, 80%. And then you would be the same. You would tell what am I reading? You would tell, I'll tell you what, Venezuela has not gotten rid of all of them. They've gotten rid of about 70% of their really bad people, and their jails are about 50%. And put into the United States, same with another countries. Some are at 30%, some are at 50%. They're all different, but the bottom line is they're all going to be at 100%. Why wouldn't you put 100% of, and they're doing it right now, and now while this third-rate phony candidate, don't forget, I beat Biden. He failed in the debate miserably, and some people said, "Oh, gee, it's too bad. It's too bad. He did so badly, and I did well in debate." The first night they said, "Wow." One of the people at CNN said that was the greatest debate performance I've ever witnessed. And then 2 days later, they don't talk about that. They just said he was bad, but that's okay. That's the way I get treated, and I don't mind that at all. What I can tell you is this: we cannot have a Democrat. We cannot have her. She's incompetent. She's as bad as Biden in a different look. She hasn't done an interview since this whole scam started. And say what you want. This is a coup. This was a coup of a president of the United States, and didn't want to leave. And they said, we can do it the nice way, or we can do it the hard way. Yeah, they just took him out back behind the shed and basically shot him. Oh, what they did with this guy, and I'm no fan of his, and he was a horrible president, the worst president in history, and one of the reasons he was so bad, first of all, the Israeli attack would have never happened. Russia would have never attacked Ukraine, and we have no inflation, and we wouldn't have had the Afghanistan mess. If you think of it, well, and we wouldn't have had Afghanistan, but we think of it, you take a few of those events away, and we have a different world. We would also have no inflation, was caused by oil. Like, to repeat those words hurt my soul, because I think we hear them once, and you're just like, oh, that's just Trump being Trump. No, no, this is disgusting. This is foul on so many levels. Like, I don't take our country seriously. I don't take our politics seriously. If this is the presidential candidate, are you serious? That's just the first one. This one is entitled No Way versus Way. Again, I said to Vladimir Putin, I said, don't do it. You can't do it, Vladimir. You do it, it's going to be a bad day. You cannot do it. And I told him things that what I do, and he said, no way. And I said, way. This is akin to, mm, I don't know if you ever played spades, but if you're playing spades, someone keeps reneging and it's costing you points, and they're just not following the simple rule. Like, this is bothering me. This dude. God, there's more. Now he had something to say about Biden's IQ. And we did things and said things throughout this president with a low IQ, very low IQ. He had a low IQ 30 years ago, by the way, but now he might not even have an IQ at all. There's nothing on the board that goes this low. I mean, I need to be burning incense at this point. Like the evil that I'm, the energy. This is Trump on education. Well, think of education. So we're ranked at the bottom of every list of the top 40. We're ranked number 40, number 38. Norway, Switzerland, Sweden, different countries are ranked good, actually. China's pretty close to the top. They're a top six or seven, but we're ranked at the bottom, almost at the bottom, 38, 39, 40. In other words, horrible, and yet we spend more per pupil than any other country in the world. So we spend more, and what I'm going to do, one of the first act, and this is where I need an Elon Musk. I need someone that has a lot of strength and courage and smarts. I want to close up the Department of Education and move education back to the states, where states like Iowa, where states like Idaho, not every state will do great, because states that basically aren't doing good, you look at Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. He's terrible. He does a terrible job. So he's not going to do great with education. But of the 50, I would bet that 35 would do great, and 15 of them, or 20 of them, will be as good as Norway. Norway is considered great. You can name them. I mean, just they're so good. Some of these countries are so good. But if you go into some of these really well-run states, we have states that don't know what debt is. We have states that are have low taxes, no debt, everybody work. They're really well run, and maybe they have certain advantages in terms of location, in terms of the land or the sun and the water and the whole thing. There are a lot of advantages that some people, but if you moved education back to the 50, you'll have some that won't do well, but but they'll actually be forced to do better, because it'll be a pretty bad situation if you think about it. You'll have some of those states. I'll bet you have 30, 35 states. It'll be much better, and you know what? It'll cost less than half of what is in Washington. And these people don't care about students in these faraway states, and it be unbelievable. A good point in that, if the states have to have to if each state has to compete against other states, then then people will naturally move to states where it's better. Well, like California, it's as well said as it's a Valley run state. I could go through. I got so many friends that are in those states, even if they're Democrats. I hate to mention certain states, but Illinois is Valley run with Pritzker. He's a real loser, but some of these places are just badly run. But it's almost going to force them to run better, and they won't do a good job initially, but you're not going to do worse than you're doing right now. And I would say that the cost, you would cut your costs by 50 or 60%, and you'd have a little monitor, and want to make sure that teaching English, as an example, give us a little English, right? Sure, yeah, no, I mean, some of these governors are doing crazy. Musk, we must make sure that our cars are beautiful, that they drive well. If they're fast, they're sexy. I mean, they're cool. In fact, literally, I mean, this sexy joke, Model S, Model 3, Model X, and Y spells out sexy. It's probably the most expensive joke out there. But I just don't know. I like cheesy humor. So listen, I think I read through the education piece, and I just read some stuff Musk said afterwards, and I mean, as an educator, you cannot, the idea that we're going to leave it up to states to decide the future of the children in this country is sick. You know, states can decide what they want to do with their money and what they're doing with education, and to assume that everyone's on the same playing field and is going to invest as they should. I mean, yes, there are some states that have a bigger leg up than others. There's just no way that this would work. But this is what Project 2025 is about. It's about abolishing the Department of Education. So this can't happen at all. Like, we can no longer disassociate Project 2025 from Donald Trump, because this was his playbook. And now it's getting bad reviews. He's trying to disassociate from it, but yet at the same time give rallies and speeches that are essentially the tenets of Project 2025. I'm gonna play you a little bit more Musk. He says, and but I'm a big fan of, like, let's have an inspiring future, and let's work towards, a better future, and we do so without demonizing people. He just said without demonizing people. His conscious talking, Kamala, wouldn't have this conversation. She can't, because she's not smart, you know? She's not a smart person, by the way. She can't have this conversation. And Biden, we don't even have to talk about it. I mean, he couldn't have this conversation. He would have given up in the first half of a question. He would have walked out. He would have said, "Where am I? Where am I going?" So anyway, but no, he wouldn't have had this. That's true of a lot of people. A lot of people would not have had this conversation. We need a man. We need a man or a person who's unbelievably sharp in order to stop all the nuclear danger and all the dangers that I'm talking about. And I got along with all the, I got along with Kim Jong Un. We had dinner, we had everything, and he really liked me, and I got along with him really well. And by the way, he's the absolute boss over there. And a lot of people said, "Oh, do you think you let me tell you I saw?" I guess gotta stop right there. Like, it's just so disgusting. It's like two misogynistic dudes just hanging out and just talking shit. And that's literally what they're doing. They're not taking this seriously. They're just talking shit. And they're being misogynistic, and they're being racist, and they're being sexist, and they're being homophobic. They're just talking shit. And they're both billionaires, so it doesn't mean anything to them. And it's not, it's, let them talk. That's fine. But for us, we don't have to support them. We can just let them talk shit. Well, we don't have to buy their products. We don't have to, endorse them and create videos supporting what they're saying. We don't have to. I'm just doing my part. That's it. Like our great first lady Melania, she looked. Wait, what does he say when he starts talking about her? Oh, here he goes. So this is where he starts hitting on Kamala Harris, right? She's getting a free ride. I saw a picture of her on Time magazine today. She looks like the most beautiful actress ever to live. It was a drawing, and actually, she looked very much like our great First Lady Melania. She didn't look like Camilla. That's right, but of course she's a beautiful woman. So we'll leave it at that, right? And then Musk says this: part of what people in America want people in America want to feel excited and inspired about future. I want to feel like the future is going to be better than the past, and that America is going to do things that are greater than we've done in the past, reach new heights that make you proud to be an American and excited about the future. I cannot believe Elon Musk would say something like that because he seems so dystopian to me and disconnected that I can't believe he would say something like that. And if you feel that way, this is not the person you should be talking to, clearly. Um, I think this is the last one. Well, it's like somehow Trump started making it clear that he's kind of scared of getting arrested, right? Of being convicted. Um, so Elon talks about, my mom, you know, um, you know, do mom, okay, so he talks about his mom. It lives in New York, and there's a conversation with his mom, like, do you know anybody that's been robbed before or mugged? Anyone's been attacked or assaulted? And she says, yes, three of her friends in three separate incidents were assaulted just in recent months, just walking around the streets in New York. And I said, well, did what happened to the people that assaulted them? Oh, nothing. They got away, like, and they just know they get away and they don't even bother reporting it because there's they're not going to, people are not going to get prosecuted. They just let violent criminals out in New York. The only ones that get prosecuted is Donald Trump. Oh my God. I can't. I'm hoping that's the last bit. That is the last one. Oh, Jesus Christ. All right. So check this out. Um, there's there's an article that came out in the New York Times, and the article states this: Black men rally for Kamala Harris and confront an elephant in the room. Now, let me be honest with you. I just went through a week of misogyny. I'm asking you, did it seem like J.D. Vance stood up for his wife and children? Did it seem like J.D. Vance stood up to Donald Trump for having Nick Fuentes at a dinner who said racist things about him? Does it seem like Donald Trump is speaking out against people who are misogynistic? Does it seem like Elon Musk is telling Trump, yo, that's not cool? Does it seem like the only narrative we have to, you know, get at Kamala Harris is to somehow talk about her intelligence, is to somehow make fun of her laughter? And it has nothing to do with the content. We are saying that she's not qualified. We're making it seem like she's a hoe. I mean, it's just disgusting. My issue with this particular article, before I read it, is that it seems to me that we need to talk about the white male superiority complex who is calling out Kamala's racial identity, who's essentially calling Kamala Harris a hoe, who's saying that she's a lunatic, who's comfortable making it appear as though it's constitutionally illegal for her to become president. Like, that's the paradigm I think that's being dismissed. I don't mind talking about the few percentage of black males who are not supporting Kamala. I don't mind talking about it. But we're then ignoring the systemic truth that there is a significant number of white males who are anti Kamala Harris. I also want to call a spade a spade. There are a number of people when they are assimilating into this country from other countries, they look to the white male as the standard or the white woman as a standard, and they're following whatever it is that they do. They're not using their own intelligence. There are folks that just feel like I need to emulate, the dominant culture in order for me to assimilate to the culture, not be viewed as different. And I feel like if we're going to have a conversation, an honest conversation, like this article is purporting, like the elephant in the room, then we can have that conversation and acknowledge that this is a microcosm of a greater misogynistic culture. But to talk about, we're going to confront an elephant in the room as if the elephant is only in our room. Like, why don't I mean, this is not even an elephant anymore. I mean, this is a herd of elephants because the misogyny is spreading. It's becoming acceptable. It's not even being challenged by popular media that you're calling her a lunatic, that she's not intelligent to speak in a press conference. Come on. But I digress. Let's go through this article so you can hear what I'm saying. Um, I'm standing behind a black woman to be president of the United States, and it doesn't make me any less of a black man, said the Illinois Attorney General. I'm asking all of you to do the same. A day after Vice President Kamala Harris announced that she intended to seek the Democratic presidential nomination, more than 40,000 black men from across the country convened on a virtual fundraising call to discuss what the moment required of them. I was one of those brothers, by the way. For 4 hours, one black man after another, prominent politicians, activists, entertainers, laid out the challenges ahead for Ms. Harris, including the racist and sexist attacks they expected from her opponents. In pledging their support, many offered emotional testimonies about the personal relationships they have built with her. But it was not long before the men confronted the elephant in the room. Sometimes, as black men, we get confused as to what strength is. And sometimes we think that standing behind a black woman as a leader does not display strength as black men, said Kwame Raoul, the Attorney General of Illinois. I'm here to tell you all tonight that it does the opposite of that. It displays strength. Mr. Raoul then drove home his point. I'm standing behind a black woman to be president of the United States, and it doesn't make me any less of a black man, he said. I'm asking all of you to do the same. The call, one in a series the Harris campaign has held in recent weeks with black women, and white dudes, was a rallying cry to a part of a crucial Democratic constituency seen as skeptical of Ms. Harris. While black men have been reliable voters for Democrats for decades, Mr. Raoul was touching on an uncomfortable truth. A small but significant slice of black men have historically been hesitant to support black women seeking the highest positions of power. The numbers are on the margins, but could be crucial to Ms. Harris to victory in November. Dr. Moya Bailey, a Northwestern University professor who coined the term misogynoir to describe racist misogyny, said in an interview that white patriarchy is not unique to the black population. The consequences are much higher. Scholars note that a demographic group that is conservative on many social issues has historically equated leadership with masculinity, born out in the dearth of black female leaders in the church, business, and elected office. When Shirley Chisholm, the first black woman elected to Congress, announced her intent to seek the Democratic presidential nomination in 1972, she faced pushback from black male colleagues who felt she should have sought their approval. Black male politicians are no different from white male politicians, Ms. Chisholm said. At the time, this woman thing is so deep. Nearly half a century later, Stacey Abrams organized Stacey and the Fellas, gatherings during her failed 2022 run for governor of Georgia because of concerns that her support among black men was tepid. If black men vote for me, I will win Georgia, she called out to them at one event. Ms. Harris has her own challenge after decades in law enforcement when she built a top cop persona associated with the incarceration of black men and became a proxy for a democratic establishment that has increasingly left black men disillusioned. Polls from the New York Times and Siena College last year found that black voters, and particularly black men, were more disconnected from the Democratic Party than they have been in decades, frustrated with what many saw as inaction on their political priorities. In the 2020 election, 12% of black men said they had voted for President Donald Trump, compared with 6% of black women, according to an Associated Press survey. Ms. Harris' campaign advisors acknowledge that the black men drawn to Mr. Trump see him as a projection of strength and that the former president is banking on their support once again. I seem to be doing very well with black males, Mr. Trump said at a news conference at Mar a Lago last week. But historians, academics, and black male leaders say that Ms. Harris' ascent may signal a change. Mayor Brandon Johnson of Chicago, who was on the call with the black men, urged them not to flinch in supporting Ms. Harris. It is very evident that there are forces that want a rematch of the Civil War, Mr. Johnson said. They made it very clear a season ago. They are playing for keeps. The best moment that we have to secure our democracy and protect the progress that we've made as a people is to put our arms around this sister. Black male leaders rallying support for Ms. Harris said Mr. Trump only helped their effort during an appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists. Facing a panel of three black women reporters, Mr. Trump falsely said that Ms. Harris, whose mother was Indian and whose father is Jamaican, had only recently decided to identify as black for political purposes. He also proclaimed himself the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. Mark Morial, the president of the National Urban League, said such moments would make it harder for black men to explain to other black people why they would vote for Mr. Trump over Ms. Harris. On the call, Mr. Morial made a point to emphasize that Ms. Harris was qualified for the job, having been an elected official for decades, who spent 4 years as vice president to a consequential president. He urged the men to not engage or allow people to create a double standard in assessing her readiness for the job. An African American male has to talk in the community to African American women about why he would pick Trump over an African American woman. I know that's right. Mr. Morial said in an interview, adding that my mama would run me out of the house if he said he was going to vote for Mr. Trump. I know that's right. Ms. Harris will still face a significant challenge in motivating black men to go to the polls, said W. Mondale Robinson, the mayor of Enfield, North Carolina, and the founder of the nonprofit Black Male Voter Project. Ms. Harris is not a trusted messenger for black men, he said. Mr. Robinson spoke on the call, rallying support for Ms. Harris, but said the callers did not represent the views of all black men in the United States, including the many who have lost faith in the system. Everything she says will be looked at with a side eye from black men because there's a lack of trust in politicians coming for you in election years, saying they're going to do something, then they don't deliver on it, Mr. Robinson said. For more than a year, Ms. Harris has paid close attention to signs of erosion among black voters, and specifically men from the Democratic Party. She has invited black male business leaders and heads of grassroots organizations to her official residence to hear their concerns. She has held events around the country to make the case for how the Biden administration's domestic policies can help black male voters. In early 2023, the NAACP helped Ms. Harris organize a meeting of about 60 black men at the White House. Dominic Whitehead, the NAACP senior vice president for campaigns and mobilization, said that the men who attended were wary about her background as a prosecutor and that he thought the meeting would feel transactional, merely a photo opportunity. There had been some neglect toward black men and their issues, Mr. Whitehead said. I think there were some hard truths they needed to hear about, but they were open to hearing that. By the end, the men had engaged with Ms. Harris on an array of topics, including their economic mobility in the job market. Before she left the room, Mr. Whitehead said, Ms. Harris told the group, I see you, we see you, and we know this has not been easy. Mr. Trump and his allies have made the push for black men by marketing gold sneakers to them, campaigning with rappers, and claiming without evidence that those who cross the border are taking black jobs. Mr. Trump's surrogates have held listening sessions in a cigar bar in Philadelphia while contending that the Democratic Party has abandoned black voters. Mr. Trump has gone so far to say that black men would vote for him because they could relate to his recent convictions, a claim Ms. Harris has called insulting. She has also said she has work to do to earn their votes. There is a trope in this election which I take issue with because the underlying premise suggests that black men should be in the back pocket of Democrats, Ms. Harris said in an interview with The Nation magazine last month, and that is absolutely unacceptable. Here's why. Why would any one demographic of people be different from any other demographic? They all expect you to earn their vote. You've got to make your case. Earlier this year, Ms. Harris invited groups of black male leaders to her official residence at the Naval Observatory for a series of meetings about the needs of their communities. One diner was described on the formal menu. One dinner was described on the formal menu card as a celebration of black excellence, honoring extraordinary men. At that event, the men told her she had to make the case that the Biden administration's policies have benefited black communities, not just by naming legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act, but by describing its impact, including lowering the cost of insulin for black families. In May, during a stop in Milwaukee on what she billed as an economic opportunity tour, Ms. Harris cited a black construction business owner by name, highlighted the growth in the number of his employees, and made her case. When the president and I came in, we said we are going to increase by 50% federal contracts going to minority owned businesses. And we are on track to get that done by the end of next year, she said. A moment later, she added, look, who's in the position of power matters. What matters to Jason Nichols, senior lecturer in the African American Studies Department at the University of Maryland, College Park, is the change he sees occurring this year. While black men may not see as much of themselves in Ms. Harris as they did in former President Barack Obama, Dr. Nichols said, they can see themselves in the progress she represents. You see, the community coming together to vote their best interests, which in this case is a black woman, he said, I think this time black men understand the assignment. Bruh, like I can't say this enough. Like, you need to understand the assignment. The assignment is to be woke. And when I say be woke, I'm also going to say stay woke. I don't think it is time for us to allow other people to dictate who we are. And I'm just speaking to my fellow black men. This 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 is your issues you have with Joe Biden, your issues that you have with Barack Obama, your issues that you have with Kamala Harris. I don't think they add up in relation to what Kamala Harris is trying to do. With all due respect, I didn't want Josh Shapiro because of, not necessarily because of his stance of the Israel Palestine, but I felt like I think part of the Democratic Party has been really focused on being centrists, focusing on being like the Joe Manchins of the world, the Kristen Cinemas of the world. Like I think we need to just stay within our roots of being liberal, being progressive. I think that's how we're going to get by. I think that's how we're going to win this election. But my core brothers, like you, there's so many. Okay, I'm gonna just leave it at this, especially as an educator. There's this rumor that Kamala Harris is locking up parents. That's not true. What she said was that she noticed disproportionately the number 90% of the murders of the people that were being killed were not high school graduates. So how can I combat that? I can combat that by trying to find out, well, what's happening to these children. Why are they dropping out of schools? Well, I'm a high school teacher. I get them when they're in high school. But what clearly some kids had a stronger foundation than others. So, what's going on in elementary school? Some folks don't bring their children to school. And is that the kid's fault or is it the adult's fault? Who's held accountable? Is it the teacher's fault, the principal? She gonna start arresting principals and teachers? No, we're holding the parent accountable. Isn't that tough love? I love you so much to hold you accountable. We don't do that anymore. Black people. And it's so funny because you get folks talking about who are conservative, they'll say, well, historically black folk are conservative. I know. I know that. Historically, black folk don't believe that crime is cool. That's not how we roll. The crime rate, I personally think, is only a result of people out of desperation. So, but we, as conservatives, as you say we are, we believe in education. So then we don't believe in holding people accountable for ensuring their children go to school? Come on, man. And then the other part about this idea that like it makes you less of a man to stand behind a woman. Like it's just disgusting rhetoric. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's disgusting. And as a man, I'm talking to my fellow brothers like this is not gonna add up. Doesn't matter if you're black, Latino, white. I'm just man to man. Like this is not cool. It's irrational. I had a friend said, "Oh, Kamala's a bird. What makes her a bird? What do you mean?" I had another conversation with a brother who was trying to tell me that, you know, all respect, Dr. Umar Johnson has done more for black people than Kamala Harris. What? But this is the point I was trying to make about Biden. Like, Biden's not running anymore. I've had issues with Biden too. And I feel Biden has also held Kamala back from being able to excel. So this week is the Democratic National Convention. Please pay attention. I hope it brings that joy that Elon was actually talking about, what someone see in this future, right? But I think it's going to also give Kamala Harris opportunity to share who she actually is. and for her to define who she is and why she chose Tim Walz, you're going to get a better understanding about like where the Democratic Party is hoping to go. Hey, listen, this is Tuesdays with Trump. I look forward to seeing y'all next Tuesday or next week. And enjoy. Be good to each other. All right. DJ Abel Greasy, I'm out.